Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube, and I want to talk a little bit in this video about one of my favorite subjects, and that's the idea of these shapeshifters. But what really are they? Reptilians? Fallen angels? Demons? Tares? Serpent seedline? Are there beings on this earth that live with us, that look like us? They have jobs, they have families. But they're not the same. There's something missing. A soul, perhaps. Are there empty vessels that live on this planet with us? Permanent hosts for demonic entities? Have these beings actually been created? Are they actually here with us? Are there creatures among us that can never be saved? Placed here on this earth to test the rest of us? Or is there something else going on? There's so many questions when it comes to this subject for me. Would the Creator actually create beings like this that could never be saved and allow them to be born on the earth and to grow on the earth with us? And knowing full well that their whole goal, their whole mission is to mess with humanity, is to destroy lives. Are these entities able to attach themselves to us, to all humans? There's also a school of thought out there that we are both of these things, that we are the seed of the woman or the seed of God, and we're also the seed of the enemy or the seed of the serpent. I have some footage I want to show you here in the video in just a little bit that, as far as I'm concerned, is definitely some of the most intriguing footage I've ever seen in relation to this subject of interdimensional beings attaching themselves to us, or reptilian shapeshifters, or tares. So the footage you're looking at right here is a classic example, as far as I'm concerned, of somebody who is fully demonically possessed. This footage has been online for about 6-7 years now. You can find it if you just do a search out there, a demonically possessed man eating glass or reptilian eating glass. They always use that term reptilian. It's a very popular term with all of these things. Just watch closely. I mean, first off, you can see his eyes. They're total slits, right? Now look at the mouth. Did you see the teeth right there? I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots in a moment. But just look at this man's eyes. That is full-on demonic possession there. Look at that. That is not human, okay? So there's the question, is he a host? Is there something controlling him right now? Demonic, interdimensional, demonic energy? Is there something else inside of him that's controlling him, using his body as a host? Or is this an individual creature that looks like us but isn't? Occasionally we can get glimpses of what this thing actually is by looking into the eyes, which are the window to the soul. Here's a screenshot I wanted to show you of when he's chewing the glass, because that's what this guy's doing. He's eating glass, he's also eating fire. And look at the teeth right there, guys. I mean, this isn't CGI, this isn't Photoshop, nothing like that. That's real. The Hopi Indians of northern Arizona have traditions that recall a time when their, quote, Snake Brothers built and occupied underground cities in Arizona, California, Mexico, and also in Central America. One such underworld city is believed to have been built on the west coast near the Pacific Ocean under Los Angeles, California. This is one of the most interesting stories I've seen in a while. It just came out of it last year. It's actually from the Los Angeles Times, January 29th, 1934. And the title is Lizard People's Catacomb City Hunted. Engineers sink shaft under Fort Moore Hill to find maze of tunnels and priceless treasures of legendary inhabitants. Busy Los Angeles, although little realizing it in the hustle and bustle of modern existence, stands above a lost city of catacombs filled with incalculable treasure and imperishable records of a race of humans further advanced intellectually than the highest type of present-day peoples, in the belief of G. Warren Schufelt, geophysicist, mining engineer, now engaged in an attempt to wrest from the lost city deep in the earth below Fort Moore Hill the secrets of the lizard people of legendary fame and the medicine lodges of the American Indians. And so convinced is the engineer of the infallibility of a radio X-ray perfected by him for detecting the presence of minerals and tunnels below the surface of the ground, an apparatus with which he says he has traced a pattern of catacombs and vaults forming the lost city that he plans to continue sending his shaft downward until he has reached a depth of 1,000 feet before discontinuing operations. Shufelt learned of the legend of the lizard people after his radio X-ray had led him hither and yon, over an area extending from the public library on West 5th Street to the Southwest Museum on Museum Drive at the foot of Mount Washington. I knew I was over a pattern of tunnels, the engineer explained, and I had mapped out the course of the tunnels, the position of large rooms scattered along the tunnel route, as well as the position of deposits of gold, but I couldn't understand the meaning of it. Then Shufelt was taken to Little Chief Greenleaf on the Medicine Lodge of the Hopi Indians in Arizona, whose English name is El Macklin. The Indian provided the engineer with a legend which, according to both men, dovetails exactly with what Shufelt says he had found. According to the legend as imparted to Shufelt by Macklin, the radio X-ray has revealed the location of one of the 3 lost cities on the Pacific coast, the local one having been dug by the lizard people after the Great Catastrophe, which occurred about 5,000 years ago. The legendary catastrophe was in the form of a huge tongue of fire, which came out of the southwest, destroying all in its path, the path being several hundred miles wide. The city underground was dug as a means of escaping future fires. The lost city, dug with powerful chemicals by the lizard people instead of pick and shovel, was drained into the ocean, where its tunnels began, according to legend. The tide passing daily in and out of the lower tunnel portals and forcing air into the upper tunnels, providing ventilation, and cleansed and sanitized the lower tunnels, the legend states. Large rooms in the domes of the hills above the city of Labyrinths housed 1,000 families in the manner of tall buildings, and imperishable food supplies of the herb variety were stored in the catacombs to provide sustenance for the lizard folk for a great length of time as the next fire swept over the earth. The lizard people, the legend has it, regard the lizard as a symbol of long life. Their city is laid out like a lizard. According to the legend, its tail to the southwest, far below 5th and Hope Streets, its head to the northeast, at Lookout and Marta Streets. The city's key room is situated directly under South Broadway near 2nd Street, according to Shufelt in the legend. This key room is the directory to all the parts of the city and to all record tablets, the legend states. All records were to be kept on golden tablets, 4 feet long and 14 inches wide. On one particular tablet, they also found the history of the Mayans and the recorded origin of the human race, they believe. Shufelt stated he has taken X-ray pictures of 37 of these tablets, 3 of which have their southwest corners cut off. He said, "My radio X-ray pictures of the tunnels and rooms, which are subsurface voids, and of gold pictures with perfect corners, sides, and ends, are scientific proof of their existence." Shufelt said, however, the legendary story must remain speculative, unearthed by excavation. The lizard people, according to Macklin, were of a much higher type of intellectuality than modern human beings, and the intellectual accomplishments of their 9-year-old children were of equal of those of present-day college graduates, he said. So you have to admit that story is very interesting, and it certainly seems to lend some credence to the story of these serpentine beings, these reptilian beings, living here on the planet with us, among us. Pop culture has been slamming us with these images for years, this reptilian race among the humans, fighting against the humans. Now, of course, all of this can go back to the Bible. We see the serpent in the Bible, right? We see the battle between humanity and the serpent seed and the seed of the woman. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. But that night, as the workers slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat." The tare that Jesus described in this parable was also known as the darnel seed, which looks almost exactly like wheat in the beginning stages of its growth, but after it grows a little more, it becomes evident that it's a weed, and it actually uproots the wheat. So when one of the farmer's workers asked him, "Shall we pull out the weeds?" the farmer replied, "No, you'll hurt the wheat if you do. Let both grow together until the harvest. Then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds and burn them, and to put the wheat in the barn." I believe Jesus told this story to point out that there are people in the church who have infiltrated our ranks. While there is wheat, there are also tares. We don't know who is who, necessarily. You'll find them sitting side by side in a pew, breathing the same air, singing the same songs. One may be a believer while the other may be an unbeliever. One may be the wheat while the other one is a tare. There will always be people who infiltrate our ranks. Judas Iscariot, Ananias, Sapphira, the satanic plants that undermine the Word of God. But it is not our job to weed these people out. We don't see a person's heart. Our concern shouldn't necessarily be who the hypocrites are, who the fakes are, but are we the fakes? Are we the fakes ourselves? Our job is to take care of ourselves, to take heed and make sure that we are true believers. So in that context alone, it seems to me that the wheat and the tares are different from these beings, these serpent beings, these reptilian beings. And throughout the years, I've questioned the connection there myself in many of my videos. Are there actually beings that live among us that look like us, but are actually some kind of a demonic being, or some serpentine being, or a reptilian? Or does this have more to do with demonic energy? Is that what we're really dealing with here? And as I said, you can look back through history and find that the serpent as a deity is one of the most common figures of worship for many years in most cultures. And why is that? Is that because their god is a serpent? I mean, you can even look back at the caduceus, which was the same staff of Moses, and it has the two snakes climbing across. That's also the mark of the American Medical Association now. It's very interesting. And then we have the most common sign of Christ. It's a cross, without the snakes. And then you have the Kabbalah tree of life symbol with the serpents entwined through it. Essentially, they are ascending the throne of man. To his head they travel to assume authority. Now remember this, because this actually connects to something I want to show you here in just a minute. And of course, something else very interesting to consider is the principal duty of Michael the Archangel. And what was his principal duty? It was to slay serpents. Now there's also a lot of really interesting research you can do on people speaking with these things, talking with these interdimensional reptilian beings or serpent beings. Sometimes they call these things the clockwork gnomes, the clockwork elves. What I'm referring to are these interdimensional beings that many people have described meeting and seeing and interacting with while on a psychedelic trip, whether it be DMT, LSD, whatever. But typically it seems that DMT really brings out this experience. And again, there are extensive stories online from people who've taken the trip and have actually met these things and seen these things. And it's interesting, once again, it goes back to the serpents, the reptiles. While researching this video, I actually read a lot of different accounts of these things. Here's just one I'll share with you out of the many I read, but I thought this was interesting. And this is a man who's describing his trip on DMT. In this part right here, he says, I spent some of the time in this peak state on DMT looking down into my bathtub and also at my chest and my legs and the water. The colors and patterns of it were beyond belief. They were translucent green and yellow, pinkish, orangey, glowing. The strangest spider webs began to emerge, and prehistoric reptilian creatures began to emerge from the water, which was now a pool of reptilian life. My legs were now covered in these other body parts of crocodiles or lizards, salamanders and toads. Or maybe my legs were the lizards now, I wasn't sure. Or perhaps it was just the lizard within me that was emerging. And I started shaking about a bit as the odd crocodile started snapping at me. When my legs moved, it was the reptiles moving. I was the reptile. The bath water my body was resting in was the color of an eternal goo, a strange but weirdly familiar mixture of all the liquids of this world together, and my body was in it. I was it. I was becoming it. It's kind of a trip, right? And that's not the only example I saw where people felt like they were turning into the serpent or the reptile. I read many examples from people that were experiencing very similar things. This whole idea that they are the reptile, they are the serpent, and that on this drug they saw it emerging more, taking over more. They were becoming more the serpent than they were the human. While at the same time they're actually having dialogue with these other beings, these elves, these gnomes, these other reptiles. So it makes me wonder, is this just somebody's mind acting up, are they just tripping out on drugs and they're just freaking out or whatever? Or could it be that all of these people having similar experiences, is that telling us something? Is there something we need to see here? Perhaps these psychedelic drugs are the key to the serpent within you. And if that's the case, I personally wouldn't want to access that. Maybe we're literally allowing these things into us when we take those kinds of trips. These lizards, these serpents, they show up in the strangest of places. We find them all the time. And oftentimes most people have no idea why they're there. This was a story right here. Why is there a lizard in Lincoln's new commercial with Matthew McConaughey. It was from a car commercial where Matthew McConaughey's playing poker with a couple of people. It's all about the car and just hanging out. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the commercial, randomly, for no reason whatsoever, so it seems, they show you this lizard right here. And this is intercut with Matthew McConaughey playing poker with a couple of people. And then you have people asking, why? That's random, that's weird, why was that there? Well, some of us know, right? Some of us see why, we understand. It's a serpentine subliminal, if you will. It's that serpent spirit. Or is this telling us more? Is this a serpent seed line? Are we watching a bunch of serpents playing poker? I tend to believe that it's more representing that spirit, that demon seed, that serpent seed. So there's different kinds of anomalies that people call reptilian shapeshifting. And again, you see this on YouTube. It's been on there for years. Anytime there's a shapeshift or something like that taking place, people immediately want to call it reptilian shapeshifting. But there are a lot of different examples of these shapeshifts. Now, me personally, I went to college for film, and my major was in screenwriting, but my minor was in editing. So throughout the years, I'd say the mass majority of these so-called reptilian shapeshifting videos I see, I think are bunk. I really think that typically a lot of these are anomalies, video anomalies, artifacts, and sometimes it has to do with a three-point lighting system during an interview, and that can tend to cause what would look like a slit, sometimes in the eye. And then you get weird ones like this. This is President Obama. And here's a really weird one. I've put this up in a few of my videos, but this is Angelina Jolie from many years ago. You can look this up. There's multiple pictures of her, and what it looks like is that she's doing some kind of a shapeshift. Look at her jaw right there. That's really strange. But she's a weird one anyway, Angelina Jolie. Very strange. While I was making the video, I remembered this weird scene from that Steve Carell movie called 40-Year-Old Virgin. And here's a scene where he's about to look at some porn and kind of do his thing. But before he does, he reaches up on his mantle and he turns this statue around. And the statue is actually some demonic reptilian creature. Now I know this is really subtle, and some people would be like, oh, you're just reaching, it means nothing. Same thing with those commercials. It's the same thing with that commercial. Why is the serpent in the commercial, right? I'm trying to show you how inundated we are with this stuff, and how so many people don't even see it. Of course, we have the Weird Al video. I'm sure you saw that. There's the reptilians, right? Then we have stuff like this, and again, I see this all the time. I'm sure some of you do too as well, but I think most people miss this. They'll put pictures out like this. Here's an old picture of a famous Nazi, but you look at his eyes, and once again, we have the serpentine slit. And then we have these pictures. This one was really interesting to me. This is actually on Drudge just over the last year. Hillary Horror demon photo moved on wire, Drudge report. And Matt Drudge actually posted this picture up on his website, which is the most accessed news website on the internet. It really makes you wonder just how much Drudge knows himself, doesn't it? But Hillary, there have been some really interesting things with her eyes as well. Not just these two pictures. Let me show you this one. This one's really creepy. I've shown this in some other videos as well. Dave LaChapelle, he's a famous photographer. He's also made music videos and stuff like that. But he's definitely steeped in the occult and the mystery religions. A lot of the symbolism he uses goes all the way back to the Assyrians and Babylon and whatnot. He knows what's going on. He has certainly been schooled in the occult practices. He knows what's going on as far as that stuff goes. And it's incredibly evident in this picture he has of Hillary Clinton. What you're looking at right there is the main page from LaChapelle's website. So if you want to go see this picture for yourself, you can. Here's a better picture of it. Let's take a look at this, guys, really, and just look at Hillary's left eye. Remember, this is a professional photographer, okay? There are not going to be any mistakes or anything. If there was, he would make sure they took it out. And this is a part of his portfolio, his professional portfolio. And in there he has this picture of Clinton. And her left eye is the reptilian slit, or the serpent slit. And of course you have the rotten apple right there on her desk, right? So we put this together, we understand a bit of the history of these things, and once again we see the message. Hillary is one of them, or Hillary is possessed by something. She's been taken over. She's a host for a spirit. What is Coloboma? Now, this right here is one of the most common excuses I've seen people use in a lot of these so-called reptilian videos. They just say, oh, it's just Coloboma. Well, right there's a pretty good picture of it. You can look up online more pictures of coloboma. Now when you compare these anomalies to some of the anomalies we find online of people possibly shape-shifting, or we see some kind of an entity inside that person or on that person, you could tell right away these are not the same thing. They're completely different. You probably remember this story. It broke really big, went mainstream, went viral, and the White House responds to creepy alien bodyguards conspiracy. I personally wasn't into this one. That's just me. Now, once again, I've seen a lot of videos that are kind of far away like that are a little bit blurry. They kind of blur everything together. And it's just kind of hard to tell. And of course, it just mutates. It looks like, oh, the face is, shape-shifting. There's a change going on there. So obviously, this person's not shape-shifting in front of all these other people. Right? There's tons of people around. But I guess the question really is has something to do with the camera. Now that's a very common belief among a lot of the people that believe in these things, I find, is it has to do with the cameras. And the reason we're seeing more of this stuff now is because everything's been changed to HD. So now that everything's in HD, over the last few years you see this rise in these kind of videos of all these different anomalies taking place. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful. As with anything, I do believe there's some truth to some of this. I also believe there's tons of deception. And it's always the deceptive stuff that's going to go mainstream, or it's going to go big, or really go viral, right? Because this is what they want. They want it out there. They want it to seem like we're all kooks, we're crazy, whatever. Meanwhile, this stuff really exists. It also reminds me of this story here. You may have heard of this one. I'm going to do my best to pronounce that. Prosopometamorphosia, the woman who saw dragons. Very interesting story. Check this out. In July 2011, a 52-year-old woman presented to our psychiatric outpatient clinic with a lifelong history of seeing people's faces literally change into dragon-like faces. What does a dragon look like? According to the patient, when someone turns into one, their face becomes black and it grows long, pointy ears and a protruding snout, and displayed a reptoid-type skin with huge eyes, bright yellow, green, blue, or red. These hallucinations, as they call them, didn't just occur when the woman was looking at real faces. The dragons also came out of nowhere. She would see similar dragon-like faces drifting towards her many times a day from walls, electrical sockets, or computer screens, in both the presence and absence of face-like patterns, and at night she saw many dragon-like faces creeping out of the dark. Scientists actually tested her. There was neurological examinations, blood tests, and EEGs, and everything came out normal. So even though everything tested out normal, the doctors still gave it a name, right? They gave it a title, and they say, well, it's just some kind of a rare condition. But is it really a rare condition? Or I wonder, does this woman have some kind of an ability that most people don't? Maybe she's the kind of a person who doesn't actually need these psychedelics and whatnot to see these things or enter into that realm. Maybe she's one of the few people out there that really have the eyes to see these things all around us. But of course, the scientific community could never sign off on something that crazy, right, or that out there. So of course we can't mention reptilians, right, or the serpent seed line among us, or anything like that without mentioning John Carpenter's classic movie, They Live. Even as a kid when I saw this, I loved the movie, and it still stands up to this day, especially knowing the things we know now. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically about a guy that finds this box of sunglasses, and when you put on the sunglasses, well, he sees reality, he sees the truth. He sees all the subliminal messages around us, predictive programming, social engineering, all of it. Most importantly, he sees that there's another race of beings living amongst us. They look like us, they talk like us, they have families, they work with us. They're everywhere. But they're not like us. They're different. The movie They Live took more of an alien angle as far as the visitors, these creatures among us, are concerned. What's really interesting to me, and many of you may not know this, but They Live isn't an original concept. It was actually written from a short story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. And this is from many, many, many years ago, but check this out, because the original short story has more to do with the reptilian race, or a serpent race among us, than it does aliens. Here's just a few paragraphs from the actual short story, 8 O'Clock in the Morning. One of the subjects awoke all the way. This had never happened before. His name was George Nada, and he blinked out at the sea of faces in the theater, at first unaware of anything out of the ordinary. But then he noticed, spotted here and there in the crowd, the non-human faces, the faces of the fascinators. They had been there all along, of course, but only George was really awake, so only George recognized them for what they really were. He understood everything in a flash, including the fact that if he were to give any outward sign, the fascinators would instantly command him to return to his former state, and he would instantly obey. He left the theater, pushing out into the neon night, carefully avoiding any indication that he saw the green reptilian flesh or the multiple yellow eyes of the rulers of the earth. So once again, we have that idea in popular culture of this serpent race living amongst us, but only a few people can actually see them for what they really are. Now here's another one from a few years back that was just crazy. If you get a chance, please go online and look this one up, Reptilian Caught Hissing on Live TV. You can find the footage online of this guy literally hissing like a snake at somebody that he's mad at. And this happened on live TV. So again, it makes me wonder, is this a being that looks like a human? Or is this somebody who's being controlled more by their reptilian brain than anything else, if you will? Is there something controlling him, some kind of a serpent energy controlling this guy? Alright, so we've seen a few different examples of footage, right, of so-called shape-shifting, and it's not always in the eyes. Sometimes it's taking place all around the body, or on the head, or all over the face. Sometimes it's the teeth that are shape-shifting, sometimes it's hands and fingers. Here's an example specifically I wanted to focus on, because I'm about to show you some footage, and this right here is the same kind of an anomaly that you're going to find in this footage. And I've seen this happen a few times. It doesn't happen often, but every now and then you'll see this particular anomaly show up. Here's another one of the same anomaly, but it's happening on Ron Paul. Now, when you see this particular kind of an anomaly, it's really interesting because it moves with the person's face, it moves with their head, it stays right there. It's not affecting anything else. There's nothing going on in the background, you don't see anything happening on the body. It's always right around the face. But what is it? There's a very interesting theory on what this actually could be, this particular anomaly. Check this out. So it's interesting, right? And again, this goes back to the Kabbalah Tree of Life. Now, is this what we're dealing with? Is this what's happening? Is this reptilian demonic energy trying to attach itself to our chakras? And is that represented in a way right here through the Kabbalah Tree of Life and the serpent? Is it this energy attached to us and manifesting through us as hosts? Now, keeping all of that in mind, I wanted to show you this. This is the footage I want to show you, and I'm going to leave a link below so you can actually see the original for yourself. The person that made this video was just making an observation. It's somebody who never does so-called reptilian videos or paranormal videos or anything like that. But he was watching this video right here of a tattoo artist. And this guy's explaining some of his artwork, things like that. But it was the strange anomaly that actually appears on this guy that actually captured the original uploader's attention. So his video is basically showing you this, and he's explaining to you, look guys, I'm not into this stuff, I don't do reptilian things or whatever, but look at this, and what is this, right? So let's play this out and you'll watch. You can already see a little bit of a weird anomaly happening on his face right there, okay? Now again, paying close attention, you see something to his left side. Now watch as that begins to materialize more and more. And it actually looks like some kind of a creature. You can see two hind legs there, and you'll see it literally attached to this guy's side and also partially over his face. And it becomes more clear. And here in a little bit, you're going to see all those weird black and white lines all mixed together like we saw in some of those other examples. And you see it manifesting more and more, whatever it is, but you can actually see something there, some form of a creature. Again, on the back there, you can see the hind legs, and it looks like it's sitting up on his shoulder, and its head is literally merging into this man's head. Is this one of those entities attached to this guy's chakras? Now keep watching, and in a second it's just going to disappear. But right here it's fully formed. Whatever this thing is, you can see that it's fully formed, right? Now keep watching, and here in a moment it's just going to disappear. And there it goes. Now I'm just going to pause right there for a moment so you can see it's completely clear, right? Completely clear. Now again, just from my own background as an editor, I've never seen anything exactly like that before. I can explain some of these other anomalies away, but this one is really interesting, especially knowing what we know. And here's just a few close-up pictures I wanted to show you, but isn't that crazy? Look at that. You can really see the shape of a being, the shape of some kind of an entity meshing into this man's face. Controlling him? Is that what we're seeing here? You can see the colors, you can see the shapes, you can see it literally forming a body. And here's another picture of the guy's face, and you look to the right, and again you can see an entity. It literally looks like something is attaching itself to his face. I thought some of these shots were interesting too, just getting closer into whatever this entity actually is. Now it gives a whole new meaning to me of these statues right here. You may have seen these are out in Norway, and there's tons of them, showing these reptilian or serpent-like beings on human beings' backs, or completely enslaving the human. You can see this guy's got his hands behind his back, and this reptilian or serpent creature is completely wrapped up around him. There have also been a lot of people throughout the years talking about these things, controlling them. You see the picture there in the bottom right. There's these beings, these reptilian beings, or this serpent energy attaching itself to human beings. Now here's another example that could fit into a different category, I'm not sure, but this was during the interview Oprah Winfrey did with Tom Cruise when he started jumping around on her couch. I put this video up years ago. of this strange anomaly that we see on Oprah's face, specifically in her eyes. What you're looking at, her eyes are actually closed. You're looking at the back, you're looking at her eyelids, and on her eyelids are these two eyes that clearly aren't hers, different colors, different shapes. Then you add the creepy smile across her face to that, and it makes you wonder, what are we seeing here? And there's only a couple seconds where this actually happened. And that's not normal. That's another thing I see a lot of people say with these videos. Oh, it's normal, it's just a, a digital artifact, and these things happen. That's not true. If that was true, then we would see this stuff constantly, all right? On everybody, this stuff would be popping. We don't see that, all right? It just happens every now and then. So what are we actually looking at here? Are we looking at the demon that's controlling Oprah? Is it actually manifesting through her face? Or is Oprah some kind of a skin suit and there's something else inside of it? I tend to think the former. I'm going to read some of this story here to you because it fits right in line with what we're discussing. The former Marine arrested outside the White House on an attempted murder warrant from Idaho wrote a 21-page manifesto claiming that the pastor he had shot was actually an amphibian humanoid from Mars. Kyle Odom, 30, was taken into custody after throwing non-hazardous materials onto the South Lawn, the Secret Service said in a statement. Some of the materials he threw also included flash drives with this manifesto on it. Odom says in the manifesto that was actually sent to the Washington Post as well and other media organizations that he wrote a letter to President Obama because he is certain Obama knows about the Martian humanoids among us. Odom had been the subject of a manhunt since police say he shot the Reverend Tim Remington several times in a parking lot of the Altar Church. Right after services, Odom, who has a history of mental illness, claims on the first page of his manifesto that he is 100% sane, 0% crazy. He then explains that his life was ruined by a very intelligent species from Mars whose technology is millions of years more advanced than ours. The Martians wanted him as a sex slave as part of their breeding stock for humans, whose offspring actually walk among us, he said. Odom says he shot the pastor right after the pastor's, quote, true face as a Martian briefly appeared while Remington was attempting to persuade Odom to become a pastor himself. And I'll stop there. Now, there's a lot of things about this story. It's the fact that it's in the mainstream and getting out there is interesting enough. But you can see how it's played. I mean, this guy really does sound nuts, right? He sounds crazy. You know, the Martians, Mars, sex slaves, I mean, all this stuff, yeah. But of course, this is a mainstream story, so the crazy stuff's going to be out there for the mainstream, right? That way, anybody who wants to think about these subjects or talk about these subjects immediately, they're going to be like, oh, it's like that crazy guy, right? The Mars sex slave guy. You can see how they do this, right? This is all predictive programming, social engineering. It's also another example, you know, what are we really dealing with here? Are we really dealing with this demonic energy that's attaching itself to people and manifesting through these people? Or is this some other race, you know, these Martian humanoids that want humans for sex slaves, and it gets this just this crazy story, right? And that's always been my issue with all of this stuff. I don't believe in all the reptilian alien stuff like this. I think a lot of it's really far-fetched. I think there's a lot of truth in there, and there's also a lot of deception. And news stories like this just go to show you, you know, they love that deception. They love pushing this as just some crazy, kooky stuff, right? Meanwhile, we know that there is some truth to all of this. Now, of course, there's another story that just came out back in July of 2015 that relates to this story. You may remember this. There's a man in Los Angeles that was found decomposing in his car. His fiance's family, once approached, actually said that he was an alien hybrid secretly working for the government. The bizarre statement came after the betrothed woman's lawyer identified the dead man as Jeffrey Allen Lash, almost 1 week after he was discovered rotting in his car parked on the street in Pacific Palisades. Los Angeles police found more than 1,200 guns, nearly 7 tons of ammunition, bows, arrows, knives, machetes, and $230,000 in cash inside the home. They also discovered a Toyota SUV that was designed to literally drive underwater. And aside from that, he had 14 other vehicles registered in his name. So once again, we see these stories coming out into the mainstream. And I do believe there's a little bit of truth in some of these and a little bit of deception. But that story was definitely one of the most interesting stories I'd seen from last year, especially the fact that it broke into the mainstream. So is this some kind of truth of these reptilian overlords finally coming out, or is there something else going on? Is the media manipulating these stories? So this really is a fascinating subject, and as you can see, there's so many different avenues you can go when you tackle this subject, specifically when looking at all the eye anomalies and the shape-shifting anomalies we see so many times. I personally think there's a lot of different factors at play here. But one thing I do think for sure is that this right here is a very good example of this kind of demonic energy, interdimensional energy, reptilian energy, whatever you want to call it, attaching itself to a human being. And I also believe that the only real way to free yourself from that dark energy attaching itself to you is through a relationship with your Heavenly Father, through a relationship with the Creator, through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And don't worry, I'm not going to start bashing you with religion. It has nothing to do with religion. This really is a spiritual battle taking place. And I believe that more and more of this wicked energy is being unleashed, and more people across the globe are becoming unwilling hosts to this energy. So thanks for checking out the video, guys.
So I really look forward to hearing your comments below and hearing some of your thoughts on this fascinating subject. So take care out there, stay aware, be good to each other, and I'll talk to you real soon.